The wail of fire truck sirens pierced the calm of the suburban evening. Red and blue lights danced across manicured lawns and spotless driveways as the massive vehicle screeched to a halt in front of the McCarthy residence. An urgent call had come in. Mr. McCarthy, an elderly man reliant on oxygen, was struggling to breathe. Time was critical. The paramedics inside the fire truck were poised to act, but their path was blocked. The obstacle, Karen. Karen stood defiantly in front of her gleaming white Mercedes, arms crossed, her sharp blonde bob framing a face twisted in a scowl. "Excuse me," she said, her tone dripping with the entitlement that had made her the neighborhood's most notorious figure. "This is private property. Your truck can't be here. HOA rules." Captain Morales, the broad-shouldered leader of the fire crew, stared at her in disbelief. "Ma'am, this is an emergency. Move your car." Karen rolled her eyes. "I don't care what kind of emergency this is. I've told you people before, these trucks are an eyesore. This is a gated community with standards. You can't just park wherever you please." Behind her, muffled cries for help echoed from inside the McCarthy home. Mr. McCarthy's daughter was pleading, her voice desperate. Captain Morales clenched his jaw. He'd seen lives lost over delays like this. Firefighter Ramirez, younger but no less determined, stepped forward. "Ma'am, move the car, or we'll move it for you." Karen gasped, clutching her pearls as if he'd threatened her life. "Excuse me, that's destruction of property. I'll have you all arrested," Morales growled. "We're wasting time." He turned to his team. "Plan B hydrant at the corner. Move." The firefighters sprinted down the street, forced to detour nearly half a block to access another hydrant. Precious minutes slipped away. Karen smirked, triumphant. "See, problem solved." But then a faint wisp of smoke curled into the air from her backyard. A sharp-eyed teenager in the growing crowd pointed. Is that supposed to be happening?" Karen turned, her frown deepening as she saw the flickering orange glow reflecting off her pristine white picket fence. A moment later, the backyard exploded into flames. The crowd gasped as fire roared to life, devouring Karen's outdoor pergola and racing toward her house. The heat was intense, warping the air. "What the?" Karen shrieked. "Who did this? This is arson." Captain Morales and his team, still hauling hoses from their detour, froze. Then they realized the fire was at her house. "You've got to be kidding me," Ramirez muttered. Karen spun toward the firefighters, her manicured finger jabbing in their direction. "Well, do something, anything." Morales shot her a look that could have melted steel. "You mean move the truck back?" Karen's face paled as the truth hit her. Her car was blocking their access. She turned back to the inferno, where flames were now consuming her patio furniture. The ridiculously expensive sectional she'd bragged about at every HOA meeting erupted in flames, its cushions exploding in a burst of fire. The crowd, phones in hand, recorded every second. One voice called out, "Karmaza," but Karen, still in denial, spun back to Morales. "You can't break HOA rules. You have to use the other hydrant." Morales' patience snapped. "Move the damn car," Karen refused. Ramirez grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, we have a civilian refusing emergency access, requesting authorization to remove obstruction by force." The response crackled back. "Approved." The crowd erupted as the firefighters smashed Karen's driver-side window. She let out a shriek that could have shattered glass on its own. "You can't do this." But it was too late. Ramirez shifted the car into neutral, and with the help of three others, pushed it into the street. By the time the hoses were in action, the side of Karen's house was fully engulfed. The crowd cheered as flames consumed her home. Karen stood frozen, covered in ash, her perfect world crumbling around her. The rules she'd weaponized against her neighbors had turned on her in the most devastating way. The moment Karen's backyard erupted in flames, the entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. The fire spread with terrifying speed, leaping from her outdoor kitchen to the wooden pergola and then climbing hungrily toward the house. Bright orange flames reflected in Karen's wide, disbelieving eyes as she stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. "Who did this?" she shrieked, spinning in circles as if searching for an unseen arsonist in the crowd. But the truth was far more humiliating. Karen had done this to herself. As firefighters blasted water onto the flames, a group of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, watching the spectacle unfold. Did she seriously just block a fire truck and set her own house on fire? One woman asked, shaking her head. Mr. Patel, who had been on the receiving end of dozens of Karen's petty HOA violations, snorted. I knew her over-the-top outdoor kitchen was going to be a problem. I bet she left the burner on. A few houses down, Mrs. Johnson recorded everything on her phone, narrating like a reality TV host. And here we have Exhibit A, the queen of the HOA realizing she's not above the law. Karen wasn't hearing any of them. She was too busy hyperventilating. Her expensive outdoor kitchen, the one she had smugly bragged about at every HOA meeting, was completely engulfed. Flames devoured the marble countertops, sending popping embers flying into the night sky. The state-of-the-art stainless steel grill was now a molten heap, and her pristine patio furniture, a loud boom signaled the cushions exploding as the fire swallowed them whole. Karen let out an ear-piercing shriek. Inside the fire truck, Captain Morales watched in grim satisfaction as his team worked to contain the blaze. This could have been avoided easily if Karen had just moved her car, he muttered. His radio crackled to life. Engine 47, we're containing the blaze, but it's spreading fast. We need additional backup. He turned toward Ramirez, who was still standing near Karen's Mercedes, now parked safely in the street, albeit with a shattered driver-side window. Tell me we're getting this on camera, Ramirez muttered under his breath. Morales exhaled, barely resisting a smirk. Oh, you better believe it. And they weren't the only ones. Karen's worst nightmare was unfolding as neighbors continued filming, capturing every second of the chaos she had caused. Karen wheeled on the crowd, arms flailing. Why are you all just standing there? Help me, someone shouted back. Like how you helped Mr. McCarthy. The crowd erupted in agreement. Karen's eye twitched. That was different, but the universe wasn't done teaching her a lesson. The fire had spread to the second floor. Flames licked at the edges of her bedroom window, illuminating her once pristine curtains as they ignited in a fiery burst. The HOA president, Mr. Thompson, approached with a clipboard. Yes, a clipboard. Karen spun toward him, expecting sympathy. Finally, someone with authority. Stop them, they broke my window. But Thompson simply cleared his throat. Karen, due to your failure to comply with emergency access laws and the damage to neighboring properties from the fire, Karen's jaw dropped. What the? Thompson adjusted his glasses. The HOA is fining you for obstruction of emergency services and reckless endangerment. The crowd burst into applause. Karen let out a strangled gasp. You can't fine me. I am the HOA. Thompson raised an eyebrow. Actually, as of 3 minutes ago, we unanimously voted to remove you from the HOA board. Another round of cheers erupted. Karen looked like she might actually explode. You can't do that, she screeched, her voice cracking. Thompson raised a hand to silence her. Karen, the HOA doesn't allow permanent exterior fire damage on homes. If you don't have repairs completed within 30 days, you'll be fined daily. Karen's soul left her body. Her house was still burning, and the HOA was already fining her for it. At this point, Karen had lost it completely. She stormed toward Captain Morales, looking like a deranged banshee covered in soot. I'll have you all fired, she screeched. Ramirez, standing nearby, couldn't help himself. He turned to Morales and said, You hear that, Cap? She's going to fire the fire department. The entire team burst into laughter. Karen turned an impressive shade of red, pointing a shaking finger at them. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Morales crossed his arms. Go ahead, sue us. But first, tell the judge why you blocked emergency services and nearly let a man die. Karen froze. For the first time, actual fear flickered in her eyes, because he was right. There was footage. There were witnesses, and if she sued, it would only make things worse for her. For the first time all night, Karen shut up. Morales turned to his crew. All right, boys, let's finish putting out what's left of this house. Karen let out a strangled noise, her knees buckling as she stared at the smoldering wreckage that had once been her perfect, pristine home. The universe had spoken, and it had a sense of humor. The smoke had barely begun to clear when the neighborhood uprising began. Karen, still covered in soot, stumbled away from her burning house, radiating off her like heat waves from the smoldering wreckage. The fire had been mostly contained, but the damage was done. Her outdoor kitchen was obliterated, her entire backyard was charred beyond recognition, and the flames had climbed just enough to make her second-floor windows explode outward in a rain of shattered glass. And now her kingdom was turning against her. The moment HOA President Thompson announced her removal, the crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. This was the kind of standing ovation reserved for the fall of a dictator. Karen whipped around, her frazzled hair looking even more unhinged in the flickering light. "What is wrong with you people? I made this neighborhood better." Mr. Patel, her longtime nemesis, stepped forward, arms crossed. "Better. You fined me $500 because my mailbox was the wrong shade of beige." Another neighbor chimed in. "You towed my car for being in my own driveway." An older woman, cane in hand, shook her head. "You made my grandson cry because you banned chalk drawings on the sidewalk." One by one, the neighbors aired their grievances, each one a reminder of just how much Karen had made their lives miserable. The most damning moment came when Mrs. McCarthy, still shaken from her father's medical scare, stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were filled with fury. "You almost let my father die tonight because you cared more about your stupid rules than an actual emergency." Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For once in her life, she had nothing to say. The next evening, the HOA board held an emergency meeting, and the entire neighborhood showed up. It was supposed to take place in the clubhouse, but there were too many people, so it was moved outside, right in front of Karen's scorched house. Karen, now demoted to mere homeowner status, stood off to the side, arms crossed, her expression swinging between indignation and barely contained rage. The meeting started calmly enough. President Thompson laid out the charges: obstruction of emergency services, HOA abuse of power, property damage to neighboring homes due to negligence, and the final straw, blocking the fire truck and endangering a resident's life. Then came the punishment. "Effective immediately," Thompson announced. "Karen is removed from any and all HOA leadership. Furthermore, due to the damages her actions caused, she will be responsible for the cleanup and repair costs to all affected properties." The crowd cheered. Karen lost it. "This is illegal. You can't do this," she shrieked, looking wildly around as if expecting a sudden loyal army of supporters to rise up and back her. No one did. Thompson ignored her tantrum and continued. "Due to the extensive damage to her property, she will have 30 days to repair it. Failure to comply will result in daily fines per HOA Regulation 4.7, exterior home maintenance." The irony hit Karen like a brick to the face. She had written hundreds of these violation letters herself, gleefully fining her neighbors for the tiniest infractions: a faded shutter, a slightly overgrown hedge, a holiday decoration left up one day too long. Now she was the one being fined, and everyone was enjoying the sweet, sweet justice. Karen stormed up to Thompson, jabbing a finger in his chest. "You just wait, I'm suing all of you." Thompson simply sighed and pulled out a neatly printed stack of documents. Karen hesitated. What's that?" "Your violation notices," Thompson replied coolly. Karen's eyes bulged. You can't fine me for this, it's my house." Thompson didn't even blink. "Exactly. And as per HOA regulations, if you don't repair it, you're in violation, and violations come with daily fines." The crowd cheered again. Karen was spiraling. She turned in desperation to her last hope, her insurance company. Surely they would cover the damages, and she could find a way out of this mess. Right. Wrong. The next day, Karen received the devastating news. Her homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover the damages because she had personally blocked emergency services, violating their terms of coverage. Her house, burned, broken, and now deemed uninhabitable, was a total loss, and she had to pay for everything out of pocket. Karen was officially ruined. A week later, the McCarthy family, the family Karen had nearly destroyed with her selfishness, hosted a block party. It wasn't just any party, it was a No More Karen celebration. Everyone came. There was a karaoke machine, barbecue, and even a giant banner that read, "Good riddance to HOA tyranny." Karen wasn't invited. Instead, she stood at a window, watching her former kingdom thrive without her. A few weeks later, her house still stood in ruins, and the fines kept piling up. The HOA refused to back down. Finally, Karen snapped. She packed her bags and moved out in disgrace. But the universe wasn't quite done teaching her a lesson. She bought a house in a new HOA community across town, thinking she could start over. But the day she moved in, she found a letter waiting for her in the mailbox, a violation notice for her mailbox being the wrong shade of beige. Karen screamed in frustration, crumpling the notice in her fist, and somewhere, Karma laughed. The air was different in the neighborhood after Karen left. It felt lighter, freer, like the entire community had just been released from a long, oppressive reign. The days of ridiculous fines, surprise inspections, and condescending HOA emails were finally over. And to celebrate, the McCarthys threw a massive block party, the HOA Rebellion Party. The entire street was lit up with string lights, music pumped from speakers, and the scent of grilled burgers and barbecue filled the air. For the first time in years, people were relaxing. Lawn chairs spilled into the sidewalks. Kids rode their bikes without fear of being fined for excessive outdoor activity, and Mr. Patel, who had racked up thousands in HOA fees under Karen's rule, fired up his brand new, completely unapproved charcoal grill. "Take that, Karen," he muttered with a smirk, flipping a burger. Even the firefighters were invited, arriving to a standing ovation. Captain Morales and Ramirez graciously accepted free plates of food, shaking hands with the neighbors like war heroes returning home. "Never thought I'd get a burger out of responding to an HOA call," Ramirez joked, stuffing his face. From her house, or what was left of it, Karen watched the celebration unfold with pure, unfiltered rage. The entire street was laughing, dancing, and having fun without her. But Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. While the neighborhood partied, she was furiously typing away at her laptop, preparing one last desperate attempt at revenge, an HOA-wide lawsuit. Her plan: sue everyone. The board, the fire department, the McCarthys, anyone who had dared to oppose her. She stormed into the local attorney's office the next morning, covered in soot stains and still seething from her downfall. "I want to sue the HOA for wrongful termination of my position," she declared, slamming her hands on the desk. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, barely looked up from his paperwork. "Okay, were you voted out legally according to HOA bylaws?" Karen paused. "Well, yes, but then you don't have a case," the lawyer interrupted. Her eye twitched. "Fine, I'll sue the fire department for destruction of property," the lawyer sighed. "Ma'am, you blocked emergency services, which is illegal. That lawsuit won't hold up in court." Karen's face went red. "Then I'll sue my insurance company for refusing to pay for the damages." This time, the lawyer gave her a sympathetic but exhausted look. "They denied your claim because you violated your own policy. Honestly, if you push this, you might be the one facing legal action." Karen's stomach dropped. She had nothing, no power, no allies, no way out. For the first time in her entire life, she was truly defeated. A month later, Karen finally gave up. Her once pristine house, now a blackened wreck, was officially condemned due to the extensive fire damage. The daily HOA fines kept rolling in, and with no insurance money to cover repairs, she was forced to sell the house at a massive loss. The neighbors cheered the day the moving trucks arrived. Karen tried to act like she was leaving on her own terms, chin high, sunglasses on, but everyone knew she had been driven out by her own rules. The ultimate irony: Karen had no choice but to move into a new HOA community on the other side of town. She thought it would be a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. But the day after she moved in, she found something waiting for her in her mailbox, a violation notice. For what? Her mailbox was the wrong shade of beige. Karen let out a primal scream, crumpling the letter in her fist. The universe had spoken, and Karma had a perfect sense of humor. The camera zooms in on Karen's crumpled violation notice, her rage-filled scream echoing into the sky. Then, smash, cut back to the celebration. The neighborhood was alive with laughter, music, and the delicious scent of grilled steaks and burgers. People were free, finally able to live their lives without constant fines, nitpicky rule enforcement, and HOA tyranny. Karen, she was just a bad memory now. But before we wrap this up, let's talk about what we all just witnessed. Let me know if you'd like me to proceed with part 6. Yes. Great, here's part 6 of the rewritten script. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with part 7 after this. This wasn't just a story about an out-of-control HOA tyrant getting her karma. No, this was a lesson in what happens when power goes to someone's head. Why common sense is more important than petty rules. How blocking a fire truck can backfire in the most poetic way possible. Karen thought she was above the rules until those same rules turned against her. And let's be honest, this was the most satisfying downfall we've seen in a long time. Let's hear from you. What would you do if Karen was in your neighborhood? Drop your best HOA Karen revenge stories in the comments. What was your favorite moment in this video? Was it when the firefighters smashed her car window? When the HOA fined her for her own fire damage? Or when she got a violation at her new house? Tell us your wildest HOA stories. Have you ever had a power-hungry Karen try to fine you for something ridiculous? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you love this insane HOA drama, we've got plenty more where that came from. Smash that like button if you think karma got Karen real good. Subscribe now for more wild HOA stories, crazy neighborhood drama, and the most ridiculous tales of petty revenge. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode of HOA Chaos. Because trust me, this neighborhood drama is far from over. Final shot. The camera pans out over the joyful block party, zooming in on a sign someone taped to a mailbox. Police. HOA tyrants not welcome. Fade to black. The grand finale of Karen's downfall wasn't just about her losing her house or her position in the HOA. It was about the neighborhood reclaiming its freedom. The block party wasn't just a celebration, it was a declaration of independence. For years, Karen had ruled with an iron fist, enforcing absurd rules and fining people for the smallest infractions. But now, the tables had turned. As the party raged on, Captain Morales and Ramirez stood near the grill, enjoying burgers and the company of the neighbors they'd helped save. You know, Ramirez said, chewing thoughtfully, I never thought I'd see the day when an HOA meeting turned into a block party. Morales chuckled. Neither did I, but I'll take this over Karen's reign of terror any day. Meanwhile, Karen sat alone in her new house, miles away from the neighborhood she'd once ruled. The violation notice for her mailbox still lay crumpled on the table. She stared at it, her mind racing. How had it come to this? She had always been in control, always the one enforcing the rules. But now she was the one being fined, the one being punished. It was a bitter pill to swallow. But the universe wasn't done with her yet. The next morning, Karen received another letter in the mail. This one wasn't from the HOA, it was from the city. She opened it with trembling hands, her heart sinking as she read the contents. Due to the extensive damage to her previous property and her failure to comply with cleanup regulations, the city was imposing additional fines. Karen's hands shook as she dropped the letter. It was never-ending. Back in the neighborhood, life went on, happier, freer, and without Karen's constant interference. The McCarthy's block party became an annual event, a reminder of the day the neighborhood stood up to tyranny and won. And Karen, she became a cautionary tale, a story told at HOA meetings to remind everyone what happens when power goes unchecked. Karen's story didn't end with her moving away. It became a legend, a tale whispered at neighborhood gatherings and shared online in forums about HOA horror stories. The video of her blocking the fire truck, her house burning, and her eventual downfall went viral. People everywhere cheered as karma delivered its poetic justice. In her new neighborhood, Karen tried to start over, but her reputation followed her. The violation notice for her mailbox was just the beginning. The new HOA president, a no-nonsense woman named Linda, had heard about Karen's antics. We don't tolerate rule breakers here, Linda said during their first meeting. Karen's eye twitched. She was no longer the enforcer, she was the one being watched. Meanwhile, back in her old neighborhood, the McCarthys thrived. Mr. McCarthy recovered from his health scare thanks to the timely intervention of the firefighters. His daughter, Sarah, became a vocal advocate for common-sense HOA reforms. "No one should have to go through what we did," she said at a community meeting. "HOAs should exist to help, not to control." The block party became a symbol of unity. Every year, the neighbors gathered to celebrate their freedom, their resilience, and their victory over petty tyranny. Captain Morales and Ramirez were always invited as guests of honor. "You guys are heroes," Sarah said, handing them plates of barbecue. "Not just for saving my dad, but for standing up to Karen." As for Karen, she eventually faded into obscurity. The fines piled up, the lawsuits went nowhere, and her attempts to regain control failed. She became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when power corrupts and common sense is ignored. The camera pans out one last time, showing the vibrant, joyful neighborhood, kids playing, neighbors laughing, and the smell of grilled food filling the air. A sign on a mailbox reads, "HOA tyrants not welcome." Fade to black.